Instancing in games is a very controversial topic. People either love it or hate it. Me personally, I don't care for it. I don't like it. However, in the case of Star Citizen, I think it is really their only option to get a lot of things in this game to really even function or work. You see, Star Citizen is a very poorly designed game with absolutely no structure. And in the absence of structure, a lot of the things that people complain about or get frustrated by happens. Things like ganking or griefing or anything else. You name it, it happens. So now SIG has realized that the only way to add structure to this poorly designed game is to add instancing. Instances are something that the developers can control in an isolated environment that allows them to tweak and tune things and provide structure for the players. This structure, of course, comes at the expense of people looking to gank and kill people doing the content in the game. I am one of those people. I was one of those people who always camped hangars. I was one of those people who camped the shuttles at Siege of Orison. I've done all that. I did all of this, and still do all of this, for a couple reasons. The first and most obvious one is that the game allows me to do it. I just can, so I will. The second is because I would get enjoyment from ganking these players. That was part of my fun. But I am not stupid. I know that that is bad for the game, and I know that something has to change. And I always knew that something would change, and this is why we are getting instancing. Try and think about it this way. You see all this new content that they showed off at CitizenCon. You see this exploration gameplay. You see all of these dungeons. You see all of this stuff, and you think to yourself, that looks great, I would love to do that. But for most people out there, I think that in the back of their mind, there is always the ever-present concern of another player showing up and attacking them while they're doing this. It doesn't matter what it is. And we saw the results of that in the PU. People simply were not doing the new content. They were afraid to do the new content. Or if they did it, they would get attacked once and never show up. How many people really got to go and experience that giant worm? Not very many, because it was mostly locked off to them as long as there was somebody contesting it. Same thing with the ADL facilities, or whatever the hell they're called, those black facilities. Same problem. If it was contested, they wouldn't be able to do it. SIG knew that was going to be an issue with those facilities, which is why they made tons of copies of the same place all over the PU. It was a band-aid because they did not have instancing. I can guarantee you that if SIG had the ability to instance this stuff sooner, they probably would have. I think the type of people that are against instancing, well, not all of them, I think a very significant portion of them, a very vocal portion as well, they are against it because they just like to really just make people miserable. They like to ruin their day, they like to upset them, they like to hurt them, and it's their way of doing that. And the game, again, it allowed them to do that. They may call it emergent gameplay, they may call it sandbox gameplay, they'll come up with a lot of things to say, but the reality is, they just like being nasty to other players. And if you're curious to how I can make that assumption about people, well, remember the start where I said I've done all these things and I still do them? That's why I do them. But for the betterment of the product and to have a better Star Citizen, I welcome instancing and I welcome throwing all of that away. I really do. It doesn't matter that much to me. I'll do fine without it. I'll probably even enjoy the game a bit more without it. Because personally, I don't really go to those events or go to those things because I go there just to do PvP. So I don't really get to explore a lot of this stuff. And, all the time, I really just don't want to do it. I don't want to be on guard 24/7. I don't want to play a game where I have to constantly be worried about being ganked or fighting for something just for a chance to see and explore the new content. It just doesn't sound very fun to me. And since we have these changes, I think that SIG has realized that that's just not a lot of fun for other people either. But beyond all of this pseudo-psychological nonsense that we're talking about, another reason why instancing is good for the game is because it's going to give you a higher quality, curated experience. I think we've all done the in-engine or in-world events, such as Siege of Orison or Xenothreat or really anything, even just bunkers. And in the absence of instancing, when the server it has to handle all the AI and everything, it just runs poor, it looks bad, it's silly, it does not do the product any justice. And honestly, they're not very challenging. None of these things are challenging because they are restricted by the server as a whole that's doing everything. But in an instanced environment that's curated for players, I think that you can get a much better combat experience from small scale to large scale, at least for PvE. The massive fleet battle they showed off with the different stages and everything, it plays like a traditional MMO raid. This is something that you could never really do in an open world game. The first one I already covered, which was is people want to show up and mess with it, is far easier to disrupt an event than it is to actually do the event. Let's look at MMO games again, for example. Your guild is doing a world boss, and another guild shows up to mess with you while you're doing it. They have every advantage. It's easier for them to wipe your raid group trying to do the world boss than it is for you to fight back while you're also fighting the world boss. So it's very difficult to do both at the same time, and it just doesn't work out. So probably why MMOs have kind of largely abandoned that. The second reason is you need all the computation power and scripting and everything else to be controlled within an instance. The open world, as we again discussed in Star Citizen, barely functions in a bunker. How do you expect that big fleet battle event, that big fleet battle, let's call it a raid, how do you expect that big raid to fire off the scripts and the triggers and to be challenging enough for the open world? I just don't see it happening. It's going to either be overwhelmed by players and be of no challenge or consequence or reward, or it's going to run so poorly that it's just not a challenge and looks goofy and doesn't work. Again, let's look at recent history. The Steal the Polaris event, remember how bad that was? What about Xenothreat? I think we all remember how bad Xenothreat was. And of course, Siege of Orison. Do you need any other examples of real recent history that we've had where the open world, and these are very simple, by the way, these are way simpler than what they're talking about, but how they don't work? Do you need more examples? I don't think you do. You get the point. The final reason why I see this as being useful for the game is that Star Citizen has, what now, 140 something ships? I don't even know anymore. Tons of ships. Most of them are still largely worthless. You try to do something in the game, if it matters, it's going to include PvP. If it's going to include PvP, you have to bring meta ships. You can't just bring what you want. And in Star Citizen, a lot of these people, they've spent a lot of money on their bad ships, and they want to fly their bad ships. But when you show up to PvP, it doesn't matter how much money you spent on that thing. You have to fly what works. You have to fly what's the meta, because everything matters in PvP. Not as much matters in PvE. By having these instances, it gives you the option to bring whatever you want within reason to do something. If it's a bomber, well, there's a bomber part of the mission, and you need bombers for that. Well, most of the bombers in Star Citizen suck, but hey, they have a use here. Same for other specific types of ships. You get the point. You understand what I'm trying to say here, right? Is that it allows players to use what they've paid for or to use what they like or love in an environment that supports them, because PvP is not always that environment. It's not all positive from me. My biggest concern is, as always, scale. How many people can I bring? I would be devastated if the fleet battle was limited to like 20 or 30 people or even 40. I would like to see a lot more. I would like to be able to bring and coordinate large-scale PvE. I think that would be fun. I think it'd be something to do an event over. I'm not just a large-scale PvP guy. I am primarily a PvP guy. That's the only type of game I play. But I think large-scale PvE would also be good for a game and something that I would like to do. But again, the concern is this. Is it going to be too small? Am I going to have a waiting list of guys wanting to get in? Am I going to have to say, hey, you can't come because you don't do enough damage, or you can't come because you don't have enough ships? Those are the concerns. But I'll know more about that when we actually get closer to having this in the game. But in closing, I guess the final thing I want to say is that for those who are against instancing, there are two people to blame for this. The first is SIG. Again, SIG incompetence knows no bounds. Their initial sales and design pitch would never work in an MMO environment. And as the game has transitioned to an MMO, it now needs to incorporate MMO features. So yes, they are to blame, number one. The second group of people to blame are the PvP players. They have no one to be angry at but themselves. Did you guys honestly think camping hangars, camping bunkers, or whatever you were camping was going to go on forever? Did you really think that a company that is now approaching $1 billion in wasted money and time and player respect and credibility was going to allow you to forever drive off potential players and customers? Do you think that this company was ever going to let you incur upon their potential revenue? If you really thought that while you were camping shuttles and camping all these things and killing all these players, if you really thought that was going to last forever, you're stupid. I knew that this stuff was going to change every single time I did it. I knew that this stuff was going to change with every single torpedo I launched into a hangar. I knew this was going to change with every single shuttle that I camped. I always knew this was going to happen. And I'm glad it did, because the game will be better for it. Thank you for watching.